Good evening to you all out there in internet land. This is Raving Ray, and I'm back with another Black History Month review. This week, I'm reviewing another of my favorite musician, another ragtime composer by the name of James Scott. James Scott was around the came out around the same time period as Scott Joplin. The two were kind of, no, I don't say they were rivals, even though there was competition, maybe more than friendly rivals. He was also an admirer of Scott Joplin. James Scott had a long career in the rag music until his death in the late 1930s. So a little bit about the man. He was born in Neosho, Missouri, to James Scott Sr. and Molly Thomas Scott, both former slaves. In 1901, his family moved to Carthage, Missouri, where he attended Lincoln High School. In 1902, he began his job at the music store of Charles L. Dumars, first washing windows and then demonstrating music at the piano as a song plugger, including his own pieces. The demand for his music convinced Dumars to print the first of Scott's published composition, A Summer Breeze, March, and Two Step in 1903. By 1904, two more compositions by Scott was made, Fascinator March and On the Pike March, were published and sold very well, but not well enough to keep the Dumars in business, and soon the company ceased publishing. Some ragtime historians, namely two famous ones, Rudy Blesh and Harriet Janis, account that Scott went to St. Louis, Missouri in search of his idol, Scott Joplin, in 1905. He located Joplin and asked if he would listen to one of his ragtime compositions. Upon hearing the rag, Joplin introduced him to his own publisher, John Stillwell Stark, and recommended that Stark would publish his work. Stark published the rag a year later as Frog Legs Rag and quickly became a hit and was second in sales in the Stark catalog only to that of Joplin's own Maple Leaf Rag. Scott became a regular contributor to the Stark catalog until 1922. In 1914, Scott moved to Kansas City, Missouri, where he married Nora Johnson, taught music, and played for silent movies as an organist and arranger at the Panama Theater. Those that knew him recall that theater work was a large part of his activity. His cousin, Patsy Thomas, remembers everybody called him Little Professor. He always walked rapidly, looking at the ground, and would pass you on the street and never see you. He seemed always deep in thought. In the last years of his life, Scott busied himself with teaching, composing, and leading an 8-piece band that played for various beer parks and movie theaters in the area. With the arrival of sound movies, however, his fortunes changed and declined, and he lost theater work, and his wife died without a child, and his health had begun to deteriorate. He moved in with his cousin Ruth Callahan in Kansas City, and he was, even though he was beginning to suffer from chronic dropsy, he continued to compose and play piano. Scott died at Douglas Hospital on August 30th, 1938, at the tender age of 52, and was laid beside his wife in Westlawn Cemetery. So that pretty much sums up James Scott's life. He had a longer career than Scott Joplin, and he got to see the birth of the jazz age and any other forms of music that came after. So I'm going to play you some selected works, or more little clips of his works. The first one I will play you is his well-known Ophelia Rag, which came out, I think, after or maybe before his famous Frog Legs Rags. So here it is, Ophelia Rag by James Scott. There you have it, the Ophelia Rag by James Scott. It's okay. It's not like, let's say, Frog Lake Rags or his other rags or Joplin's work. but it's an okay piece. For me, I would listen to it. When if I'm in the mood for that song in particular. I go for more of the well-known James Scott works. So up next, I'm going to play you another music clip. This one is called the Grace and Beauty Rag, and here it is, Grace and Beauty Rag by James Scott. There you have it, ladies and gentlemen, The Grace and Beauty Rag by James Scott. Well, this wraps up this episode's, ladies and gentlemen, in internet land. So I bid you good night, like and subscribe, and for the credit music, I will leave you with the final clip of my one favorite song by James Scott, The Frog Legs Rags from 1906.